Ladies and gentlemen, online audience, we will be resuming the afternoon session shortly. Please, before we begin, we have a brief video about ILBM prepared by ILEC. For those joining us online, we would greatly appreciate your comments in the chat box. Thank you all for your cooperation, and please start the video. Please enjoy the video.
Only 1% of the fresh water on the Earth's surface is in liquid form, with more than 90% of that in lakes. Lakes are vital for drinking water, agriculture, fishing, industry, transport, and energy. They regulate floods, droughts, and climate. Lakes support biodiversity, tourism, education, and research. Despite their importance, human settlement and usage pose risks impacting lake health. Who should protect and manage this resource? Lakes differ from rivers and oceans in several ways. Firstly, they retain water for extended periods. Secondly, they can exhibit unpredictable behavior. Lastly, lakes possess an integrating nature influenced by basin activities and encompassing various organic and inorganic components and interactions. Therefore, lake management must consider these three key concepts. The deterioration of lake environments is often unnoticed as it quietly progresses over a long period of time. When people become aware of these changes, what actions will they take? In a particular lake, differing opinions emerged on the cause of environmental degradation. Some blamed upstream agriculture, while others pointed to population growth and industrialization. The government expanded the sewage system to restore the lake, but soon realized that eutrophication couldn't be solely prevented by this measure. Additional land-based activities caused the problem, and installing advanced treatment facilities would be costly. Addressing the lake's environmental degradation necessitates a challenging integrated approach and significant sacrifices. The effective stewardship of lakes necessitates the incorporation of a comprehensive framework comprising 6 essential components: institution, policies, stakeholder participation, knowledge and information, technology, and finance. It is necessary to orchestrate each element in a coordinated and balanced manner to create the symphony. You can liken it to an orchestra playing a piece of music. Just as there are various types of lakes, there are also various orchestras. The musical score and the conductor's role in orchestrating them play an important role. These 6 pillars must be kept in balance for proper and sustainable lake management. To do this, written guidelines are needed, which can be compared to a musical score for an orchestra. The Lake Brief is a musical score for recognizing the state of a lake. The Lake Brief includes a description of the lake and watershed management, impact stories, lake watershed governance issues and initiatives. The Lake Brief will also reflect the cultural and historical context of the area. The structure of the ILBM platform varies from case to case, and ILEC presents impact stories from the diversity of lakes around the world. For example, in Japan, the soap movement was started by housewives in the Lake Biwa Basin in the late 1970s, which ultimately resulted in the development of phosphate-free detergents by the detergent industry and by enactment of an eutrophication ordinance. In India, Lake Chilika ecosystem could be restored. Fish and prawn stocks have recovered, invasive weeds have been reduced, and the income and livelihood of the fisherfolk have significantly improved as a result of integrated lake basin management backed by strong political and policy support. In the Philippines, the industrial effluent load has been reduced through the implementation of an environmental user fee system without the use of technology-based approaches. In Nepal, the fishermen set up a collaborative effort to improve their fishing grounds and increase their catch, but they realized that this would not be possible without the conservation trees of upstream farmers. With the support of an international NGO, they expanded their cooperative actions and established a system to share the rewards of success. Steps in lake management. The first step is to prepare a lake brief. Next, based on the lake brief, we identify and analyze the issues and needs of the lake. Then, methods and means to solve the problems are integrated and implemented through an institutional mechanism, enabling policy, adoption of science and technology, active stakeholders' participation, and sustainable financing. Evaluation of the lake brief is repeated on a regular basis. This is the Integrated Lake Basin Management Platform process. ILEC plays an active role in capacity building through information provision, training programs, and promotion of ILBM platform. By collaborating with stakeholders in the global water and lake sector, ILEC is committed to achieving sustainable lake management worldwide, benefiting both current and future generations. Only 1% of the fresh water on the Earth's surface is in liquid form, with more than 90% of that in lakes. Lakes are vital for drinking water, agriculture, fishing, industry, transport, and energy. They regulate floods, droughts, and climate. Lakes support biodiversity, tourism, education, and research. Despite their importance, human settlement and usage pose risks impacting lake health. Who should protect and manage this resource? Lakes differ from rivers and oceans in several ways. Firstly, they retain water for extended periods. Secondly, they can exhibit unpredictable behavior. Lastly, lakes possess an integrating nature influenced by basin activities and encompassing various organic and inorganic components and interactions. Therefore, lake management must consider these three key concepts. The deterioration of lake environments is often unnoticed as it quietly progresses over a long period of time. When people become aware of these changes, what actions will they take? In a particular lake, differing opinions emerged on the cause of environmental degradation. Some blamed upstream agriculture, while others pointed to population growth and industrialization. The government expanded the sewage system to restore the lake, but soon realized that eutrophication couldn't be solely prevented by this measure. Additional land-based activities caused the problem, and installing advanced treatment facilities would be costly. Addressing the lake's environmental degradation necessitates a challenging integrated approach and significant sacrifices. The effective stewardship of lakes necessitates the incorporation of a comprehensive framework comprising 6 essential components: institution, policies, stakeholder participation, knowledge and information, technology, and finance. It is necessary to orchestrate each element in a coordinated and balanced manner to create the symphony. You can liken it to an orchestra playing a piece of music. Just as there are various types of lakes, there are also various orchestras. The musical score and the conductor's role in orchestrating them play an important role. These 6 pillars must be kept in balance for proper and sustainable lake management. To do this, written guidelines are needed, which can be compared to a musical score for an orchestra. The lake brief is a musical score for recognizing the state of a lake. The lake brief includes a description of the lake and watershed management, impact stories, lake watershed governance issues and initiatives. The lake brief will also reflect the cultural and historical context of the area. The structure of the ILBM platform varies from case to case, and ILEC presents impact stories from the diversity of lakes around the world. For example, in Japan, the soap movement was started by housewives in the Lake Biwa Basin in the late 1970s, which ultimately resulted in the development of phosphate-free detergents by the detergent industry and by enactment of an eutrophication ordinance. In India, Lake Chilica ecosystem could be restored. Fish and prawn stocks have recovered, invasive weeds have been reduced, and the income and livelihood of the fisherfolk have significantly improved as a result of integrated lake basin management backed by strong political and policy support. In the Philippines, the industrial effluent load has been reduced through the implementation of an environmental user fee system without the use of technology-based approaches. In Nepal, the fishermen set up a collaborative effort to improve their fishing grounds and increase their catch, but they realized that this would not be possible without the conservation trees of upstream farmers. With the support of an international NGO, they expanded their cooperative actions and established a system to share the rewards of success. Steps in lake management. The first step is to prepare a lake brief. Next, based on the lake brief, we identify and analyze the issues and needs of the lake. Then, methods and means to solve the problems are integrated and implemented through an institutional mechanism, enabling policy, adoption of science and technology, active stakeholders' participation, and sustainable financing. Evaluation of the lake brief is repeated on a regular basis. This is the Integrated Lake Basin Management Platform process. ILEC plays an active role in capacity building through information provision, training programs, and promotion of ILBM platform. By collaborating with stakeholders in the global water and lake sector, ILEC is committed to achieving sustainable lake management worldwide, benefiting both current and future generations.
Thank you for watching this video. This is an introductory video of ILBM, and any comments or feedback are welcome. And if you want to learn more about ILBM, please visit our website to get the publication. And then we like to resume the afternoon session. And then first, let me invite Dr. Rafik Huge, okay, yeah. International water, environment, and climate expert. He will present about integrated lake and reservoir basin management, a framework for implementing UN resolution on sustainable lake management and climate change. Dr. Rafik Huge. Are you there?
Yes, I am. Thank you. Okay, thank you. Distinguished guests, friends, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. A good afternoon to all of you in Lake Balaton, and a good morning, afternoon, evening to those of you connected online. I'm delighted to join you all to celebrate the adoption of the UN resolution on sustainable lake management. Are the slides being played there? Rika?
Yes, we will screen share your PDF now.
Okay. Okay, good. My name is Rafik Hirji, and I was the former World Bank team leader for the GF project known in short as the Lake Basin Management Initiative, which I hope to cover in the presentation. And my presentation advocates firmly the institutionalization of integrated lake basin management, which we just saw the video of, is the framework for implementing the UN resolution and for advancing climate resilience. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. I would like to build on the UN Executive Director's recent statement. The world is sleeping on adaptation, even as the wake-up call nature is sending us becomes shriller. Please, the previous slide. The previous slide, please. Okay, my goal is to sound a loud wake-up call to the international development agencies and the global environment and water community, urgently and mainstream the highly relevant, collaboratively developed framework integrated lake basin management for implementing the UN resolution. Renewed attention to the importance of lakes and reservoirs and their rapidly degrading conditions underscores an urgent need for integrated solutions. The problem of unsustainable lake and reservoir management is not new. We knew it decades ago, and we responded by coming together, working with many partner institutions, and developed and delivered what is considered to be the best practice solutions. And it is encouraging to see the adoption of the framework at some local levels. These solutions, unfortunately, have only been used incrementally, primarily by ILEC, and in very limited ways the World Bank. But most partners who led, funded, and supported this work, including the World Bank, have dropped the ball and have all but forgotten about this work at a time of its greatest need. My presentation, I will describe the problem, discuss the available solutions, and present the opportunity for mainstreaming this. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. So, next slide, please. So let's start with the problem. The water, environment, and climate crises are exacting a heavy toll on people and the economy. Billions of people are water, food, and energy insecure. Previous slide, please. Water demand is growing, scarcity is growing, resources and ecosystems are degrading, extreme events are disrupting lives and livelihoods, and the water sector remains highly fragmented. According to the WMO report, the hydrological cycle is spinning out of balance from climate and human activities. In 2022, it found that over 50% of the world's catchment saw reduced river discharges. And it also noted that over 60% of the major reservoirs saw reduced inflows, a growing challenge for water supply. Urgent and integrated solutions are needed. Next slide, please. Renewed attention, next slide, please. Renewed attention over the management of lakes and reservoirs represent a colossal policy failure. Next slide, please. Freshwater storage, glaciers, lakes, wetlands, aquifers, and reservoirs is key to water security and climate resilience, according to a recent World Bank report. But there is also a water storage gap that is growing. Storage needs growing for meeting the needs of increasing populations, and storage is actually declining. And we are seeing all dams are failing. For example, Libya, India, and in the United States recently, due to weak governance. And a recent UN report titled Aging Water Infrastructure and Emerging Global Risk has raised alarms about the safety of nearly 59,000 large dams worldwide. The UN World Water Development Report calls for partnerships and cooperations for achieving speedy and scaled impact in addressing this crisis. So the solution is basically a loud call to the international development partners in the global water and environment community to wake up from the collective amnesia and to act and institutionalize integrated lake basin management, a highly relevant best practice framework developed collaboratively. This framework was born out of a multi-agency global lake basin initiative, which I had the pleasure of leading from the World Bank as the GF implementing agency, with my friend Professor Nakamura from ILEC as the project manager from the GF executive agency between 2002 and 2005. This initiative was funded by the GF and supported by 8 partner agencies: ILEC, LECNet, Ramsar Secretariat, Shiga Prefecture, UNDP, UNEP, USAID, and the World Bank. Nearly 290 experts from 41 countries supported this work. There were 3 regional workshops in Vermont, Nairobi, Manila that reviewed the findings. And project implementation was actually funded, endorsed, and reviewed by the International Steering Committee. And the final report, too, was endorsed by all 9 partner agencies. This multi-agency report extends the application of integrated water management from a focus on river basins to lake basin management, and considers the specific characteristics of lake basins that we just about. The report has been printed many times, has been in high demand, has been labeled the most authoritative treatise on sustainable lake management. And ILEC has used it to advance it, ILBMI, locally, nationally, regionally. With support of partners, it also helped to enact the UN resolution, which was adopted recently. That's an amazing achievement. But the work also remains highly relevant today to support the implementation of the resolution. The main message from the front and the back cover of the report is loud and clear. To sustainably manage a lake or reservoir, we also need to manage its basin. Focusing on the lake itself is not enough. The LBMI built on decades of narrowly focused work done by many people on lakes and reservoir management. And studied 28 lakes, which included 8 lakes from East and South Asia, 7 lakes and 1 reservoir from Africa, 7 lakes from Eastern and Western Europe, 4 lakes and 1 reservoir from the Americas. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. The objective of this work was basically documenting management experiences through lake basin case studies, facilitating the sharing of experiences between decision makers and stakeholders, accelerating learning and implementation of effective lake and reservoir management experiences. Next slide, please. The LBMI basically uses science to inform policy and management. There are 19 types of lake problems that originate from within and outside the basins. They are clustered in 4 areas, from in the lake, in the littoral zone, basin, and outside the basin. The table summarizes the problems of these 28 lakes. The direction of the arrows in the table, upward, sideways, downward, indicates if the problem is improving, not changing, or worsening, respectively. 20 years ago, lakes globally faced serious problems. Today, the trend is actually worsening. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. The key contribution, next slide. The key contribution of the report are these 7-8 chapters that focus on the specific aspects of governance, which we saw in this video just from ILEC. Essentially, this looks comprehensively at the institutional arrangements on policies, stakeholder participation, the role of technology, role of science, finance, etc., in a very critical manner. And it is very relevant for moving the agenda forward. Next slide, please. The key findings. Next slide, please. The main finding of the work is making integrated lake-based management a long-term element of government and public priorities, planning processes, integrated water resources management, habitat biodiversity conservation programs, economic development programs. Next slide, please. And we developed a complementary report. Next slide, please. We developed a complementary report, basically, that was prepared for the GEF. And it provides a comparative analysis of water resources problems occurring in river basins and lake basins, and policy and institutional responses associated with river basin management and lake basin management. And more importantly, it extends the monitoring and evaluation indicators of the GEF International Waters Project. And essentially, the key contribution is that it has developed indicators for measuring good lake basin governance. The 6 pillars that we saw. This provides a comprehensive way of measuring whether we are progressing in each of these areas. Next slide, please. So here's the opportunity. Next slide, please. this is the UN resolution, which is an important achievement that we talked about. And the resolution deals with various issues. The key issue with this resolution and a key limitation that appears that is important to note, that the title of the resolution is on management of lakes, not lake basins. And that is narrowly focused, and it actually conveys a backward looking instead of a forward looking message. The question is, what do we do about this? How do we move forward in light of the important developments? Next slide, please. So the solution. Next slide, please. The opportunity now. Basically, there are 6 sets of recommendations that this colloquium can take and the community can embrace, basically to move the agenda forward. First, I would recommend that the colloquium statement issues an unambiguous statement that mainstreams integrated lake basin management as the framework for implementing the UN resolution. Second, adopt this report that was prepared collaboratively by 9 partner agencies, including ILEC, the World Bank, UNEP, and others, Ramsar Secretariat, as a key guiding document, because there is no such document that exists. We have lots of science about we know a lot about the science of lake management, very little about its management experiences and the lessons there. This provides a very valuable guide. Thirdly, also adopt this World Bank document that was prepared for the GF. It helps to monitor progress in integrated lake basin management implementation progress. Okay, this will be highly valuable as you move forward to advance the resolution and to actually monitor progress. Next slide, please. Basically, next slide, please. The second recommendation is to the global water and environment community to walk the talk. We're talking about urgency, demands that the international community uses available best practice tools, knowledge, information to promote sustainable management of lakes and reservoirs. And we avoid wasting time and resources and reinventing the wheel and use non-best practice solutions that exist. And also to remember that dams form reservoirs are lakes too and need integrated basin-wide focus solutions. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. So, and another set of recommendations for UNEP and ILEC to consider, basically to integrate and collaborate with the mainstream water and land use universe, elevate catchment-based integrated lake basin management messages into the Lake Gradation Convention, the Climate Change Convention, the World Water Forum, Stockholm Water Week, in a big way. Currently, the lake community is kind of, it plays an important role, but it's hidden down there. It needs to be mainstream. You're dealing with the management of nearly 90% of the world's accessible fresh water. Okay, that's a huge opportunity and a responsibility, and we need to elevate this message. And essentially to work with basically the partner agencies, for example, with the government of Indonesia, build the global partnerships. You just mentioned developing the community of practice to mainstream integrated lake basin management. There was a large partnership we had built 20 years ago. You could perhaps consider reviving it and building upon it and using it as a big platform at the upcoming World Water Forum in Bali. That way you'll be working with the key message about partnership and collaboration with one very high priority agenda. Also, to work with the Global Water Partnership and CAPNet to prioritize the development and promotion of integrated lake basin management training. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. And the recommendation at the policy and operational level to encourage working with the environment ministries to work and collaborate with the ministries of water and lands to manage lake basins sustainably. Also to promote both top-down policy, legal, institutional reforms and bottom-up capacity building and local governance implementation action. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. And to build, to advance climate resilience, use available tools that exist. Take advantage of relevant, accessible water resources knowledge that is relevant to integrated water resources management. And just basically highlighted here the water resources and environment technical notes we had prepared, which are easily available from the World Bank website. These are short, concise notes that deals with the policy aspects of environmental flows, water quality management, non-point source control, water use conservation at municipal level, in the agriculture, management of aquatic weeds. These are highly relevant for lake basin management work, and they are available. So my suggestion is really, let's take advantage of what is out there. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Also, recommendations to advance climate resilience. Again, take advantage of and use available structured climate adaptation frameworks, drawing from good practices, global, regional, national climate change and water resources planning, development management reports to advance climate resilience at the basin level. In summary, finally, last slide, please. In summary, successful management of lakes and reservoir requires use of an integrated approach to lake and reservoir management that fully links land use, water use, social and economic factors, integrating climate change. I would like to close by thanking ILEC and UNEP for giving me this opportunity to contribute to this timely colloquium ahead of the World Lakes Conference. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Hirsch, for your presentation. And now I'd like to welcome Dr. Thomas Meffner, President, International Society of Limnology, SIL. Dr. Meffner will present about the potential role of SIL in supporting the SLM resolution and the global coalition for lakes.
Thanks a lot. Welcome to everyone here in the audience and welcome to everyone connected virtually. My name is Thomas Meffner. I'm the president of the International Society of Limnology and the vice director of the Leibniz Institute of Freshwater Ecology and Inland Fisheries in Berlin, in Germany. This is one of the biggest freshwater research institutes worldwide with almost 400 people working in our facilities. What is SIL? I don't know whether you know SIL. No, it does not work. Forward. No. We all have to learn something here. I don't know. No, it doesn't work with me. No, I clicked it. Okay. So SIL is one of the oldest international societies. Actually, it was founded in 1922 in Kiel, in Germany, by the German August Thienemann and the Swedish collaborator Eine Naumann. And the interesting point is what you see already from the Latin name, and by the way, the abbreviation SIL, sometimes you also can listen to SIL, but SIL goes back to this Latin type of description of the society as the Societas Internationalis Limnologia. And what you see in brackets, this is the blend between the basic research and the applied research. That is one of the fundamentals of the SIL association since the start. During my presidency, that is now almost 5 years long, we have actually revisited our mission and the vision for SIL. And we are now explicitly mentioning in our statement that we promote the excellence in studying and managing inlet waters and addressing global issues. And our key actions focus on international scientific networks in freshwater research. So primarily it's a research association, but we also focus on partnership for sustainable management of all inland waters. And we address global issues with an explicit reference to the SDGs. Of course, one of the big issues is also education of researchers of tomorrow. So SIL is really an association that advocates the interaction between the more senior and the junior people in research and management. SIL is truly international. At the moment, we have about 1,000 members in more than 70 countries. You see, we have still massive gaps, in particular in Africa and Middle Asia, but we try to fill these gaps. And currently we have a massive increase in members, in particular in Latin and South America. And we are very proud of having this international coverage, because this allows us to interact with many people from totally different backgrounds, totally different educational strategies, but still we are united with respect to the sustainable management of the inland water. SIL is also very diverse. We have an almost equal gender balance between female and male members. And what I told before, about 2/3 of all our members are young. So they are either students or early career researchers. The senior researchers, such as me, form only about 20% at the moment of members. So you see, there is a future. And so it's not just old guys as me, but many, many young people will contribute to the development of this society. I would like to give you 3 examples in which way SIL members have contributed to lake management internationally. The first example comes from Tamar Zouari from Israel. She has been the treasurer and general secretary of SIL for almost nine years, and she has always worked in this Lake Kinneret limnological laboratory. And Lake Kinneret is the only freshwater resource for Israel, so it has an enormous also political importance for Israel. And so this institute, Tamar involved, has dealt with water level regime changes that of course are important in a relatively dry area, massive cyanobacterial blooms, the proliferation of an invasive snail, changes of salinity by increased freshwater inflow or low freshwater inflow, and even shore overgrowth of some vegetation that was native to Israel. So here there is active contribution to the management of a large but very important lake. On the other side, it's the opposite, and this is something that I'm doing, but the project is led by Sandra Bruset from Catalonia in Spain. We are dealing with the smallest part of the lakes. So here we are talking about ponds in a size in an area that is less than, say, 1 hectare. And just to give you a dimension about it, if you focus on the area around Berlin, the capital of Germany, we talk about 300 to 400 lakes, but we talk about 30 to 50,000 ponds. And in fact, there's no database at all. We don't know much about these ponds. And there's this European project that is called Ponderful that really focuses on what's in a pond. And this is not just biodiversity, this is not just physics and chemistry, but we also deal with the importance of the pondscapes in the society context. So we work in pondscapes together with stakeholders to develop their expectations, to help them managing the ponds. We also try to develop technical handbooks and decision tools. So what is the pond you have to save first? And finally, we even want to realize climate sensitive ponds as something that can be sold. So together with small and medium enterprises, we develop a prototype of a so-called climate pond. So this is all activity, and you know the European Union often requires us to become active also in this transformation. So it's not just pure science, but transform the society. Sometimes it's a hurdle for a researcher like me, but sometimes it pushes us also beyond our fences and say, well, here we can really do something to contribute to the change. And the third example, SIL has indeed a working group on lake restoration that is led by Mikkel Lurling and Brian Spears, who is also here in the audience. And this has existed for 7 years meanwhile. And this working group has already contributed to quite many international symposia and conferences by having special sessions on lake restoration. And they have published also numerous special issues in the international journals, just to show here a list of a few things where SIL members have been active, have contributed with research and management implications. Focusing now on this guideline that Ken has suggested before, I would like to draw a few conclusions in which way SIL can become more active within all these processes. So we also should contribute to building greater partnerships with respect to societal needs. So to protect and conserve, restore and ensure the sustainable use of freshwater researchers. And here the targets are primarily the 6.5 and 6.6, so water resources management and water-related ecosystems. But what specifically could be done by SIL members? First, of course, we will continue doing research. And here's just a highlight of a few papers that have been released recently during the last 2 or 3 years where SIL members were involved. You see, the main topics are, of course, eutrophication, the biodiversity crisis, harmful algal blooms, stressors, the global carbon cycle, lake habitat improvement, but even landscape ecology, so putting the lakes into the landscape. But more, we can also contribute to capacity building. In a paper that's shown here on the right, we have a couple of years before identified that there is a challenge of by limited capacity, in particular with respect to lake monitoring or water monitoring with respect to nitrogen and phosphorus. So obviously, the capacity is not developed enough in many countries to have a proper lake monitoring with respect to nutrients. And here SIL could become extremely active. Why? We could develop something like education to our local members, or say even more, in a way that the local members, the SIL members, can then propagate the knowledge we have obtained towards citizen science. We have indeed quite a number of instruments. The first one is the so-called Tonoli Award, named after a famous Italian researcher. These are small research and management programs. So as SIL member, you can apply and you can run small programs with respect to research. We have a so-called mentor-mentee program where mentees from the global south get a mentor, and this mentor helps developing the career. It's not exclusively an academic career. It can also be a career in management. And we have recently established a network of the so-called SIL ambassadors. So these are more than 90 people internationally that are also connected to the local limnological societies. So in the long term, say within the next 2-3 years, we will have established a network to at least 10,000 limnologists worldwide. And by which network we can, of course, propagate information, but also in a bottom-up structure can collect information, what is needed for the sustainable management. We can also contribute to the global communication campaign that has mentioned several times. So we will go informing our members continuously on the key political events, but on the way back also, we will inform the public by several information campaigns on activities they can do by their own. So we have seen several examples today already, the Day of the Water, the Day of My Lake, even the Open Science Day at the Institute. All these activities can help raising awareness for the public with respect to sustainability issues. And so we could also contribute to the global coalition for lakes that Ken has suggested. In particular, I think we can discuss that SIL could engage with the World Water Quality Alliance. So here's an example, the global community of practice, but also with the ecosystem work stream. So here, via Ken, for example, he's also a member of SIL. Some connections can be established, and I'm open to discuss several of these pathways later today with Walter, with Ken. Just this is our openness, our willingness as an international society still to contribute to this process. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Meffner. So now, I'd like to welcome Ms. Sonia Koppel from United Nations Economic Commission for Europe, UNECE. Ms. Sonia will present about promoting sustainable lake management, the role of the UN Water Convention.
Thank you very much for inviting me today. Indeed, my name is Sonia Koppel. I'm the secretary of the Water Convention. And globally, as you probably know, more than 60% of all fresh water is in transboundary basins. And also around more than 40% of the world population lives in such basins. 153 countries worldwide share transboundary rivers, lakes, and groundwaters. Also, many lakes are shared between 2 or more countries, such as RLC, Lake Tanganyika, Lake Victoria, Titicaca, Great Lakes, and many, many others. So it is crucial that the countries cooperate when managing those lakes and those transboundary basins, because if not, there can be conflicts about water quantity, water quality, ecosystem, fisheries, and many other things. And we see such conflicts happening around the world. Actually, that's also why transboundary water cooperation is included in the SDGs. So the SDG target 6.5 asks the countries to implement integrated water resources management at all levels, including through transboundary cooperation as appropriate. And under that goal or target, there are 2 indicators. One measures IWM, for which UNEP is responsible, and one measures the progress of transboundary water cooperation worldwide. And UNESCO and UNECE, we are the co-custodian agencies for this. And we can see that looking at the status of transboundary cooperation, only 24 countries actually meet the SDG target so far, meaning that they have all their transboundary rivers, lakes, and groundwaters covered by operational arrangements for water cooperation. So there's a lot to do to improve transboundary water cooperation. And that's why also in the resolution, Sustainable Lake Management Resolution, transboundary water cooperation is actually mentioned several times. And also the different bodies are mentioned. If we now look at existing tools, actually out of those 24 countries, 19 are parties of the Water Convention. So the Water Convention, or the long name is Convention on the Protection and Use of Transboundary Watercourses and International Lakes, is a unique, now global, legal and intergovernmental framework for transboundary water cooperation, aimed to promote sustainable development, peace, climate action, etc. It includes the main principles of international water law, mainly the prevention of significant harm, equitable and reasonable use, and also that countries should cooperate by developing agreements and setting up joint bodies, such as Lake Victoria Basin Commission, Lake Chad Basin Commission, and others. The Water Convention also and most importantly, has an institutional framework. So it's a living instrument, a global platform, bringing together 130 countries worldwide on the topic of transboundary cooperation. It works through its program of work. So you can see here different program areas, for example, on climate change adaptation, on monitoring and assessment, or on financing. So the Water Convention has lakes actually in its title, and obviously lakes are therefore included. And Annex 2 also asks the countries to take into account specific requirements regarding sensitive and specially protected waters and their environment, for example, lakes and groundwater. Looking at a bit more the provisions of the Water Convention. So the first part of the Water Convention is focused on national water management, and it asks the countries to prevent, control, and reduce impacts through wastewater treatment. through using best environmental practice for non-pollution sources, by minimizing accidental pollution, protect groundwaters, apply EIA, and also monitor and assess regularly the water resources. So we can see in countries which have joined the Water Convention that in many of them there has really been an improvement in national water governance, for example. The second part of the Water Convention is more focused really on the transboundary level. And here countries are asked to conclude bilateral and multilateral agreements and to set up joint bodies, river basin commissions, like you have here, the Danube Commission in the region where we are here, or the Rhine Commission or the Mekong Commission, etc. But also those in this framework should happen exchange of information, joint monitoring and assessment, setting up joint early warning and alarm systems, etc., etc. The Water Convention entered into force in 1996. And originally it was limited to the pan-European region, but then it was opened up in 2016 to all UN member states. And since then, 11 countries from outside the pan-European region have joined. We currently have 52 parties, including the latest one to join, where the Gambia, Namibia, Panama, Nigeria, and Iraq. And more than 20 countries are in the process of joining the Water Convention. For example, in Cote d'Ivoire, the parliament already approved, or in Sierra Leone, the government already approved. Many other countries, mainly from Africa, but also some from Latin America, are in the process of joining the Water Convention. And actually, we're going to have here the next few days in Budapest a workshop on developing agreements. The Water Convention indeed is also active. We're active worldwide, particularly but not only in countries which have already joined. So you can see here different activities, for example, the Pan-European region and the African region, in different fields such as climate change adaptation, etc., etc. And here we have activities on the one hand, capacity building, regional workshop, global workshop, exchange of experience, and sometimes also pilot projects and projects on the ground. So lakes have been covered specifically under the convention to some extent, but probably more could be done going forward. So as I showed you earlier on, in program area 2, is focused on monitoring and assessment and data exchange. And that's also what is mentioned in the resolution in Article D or F, I believe. And here, for example, we have a working group on monitoring and assessment since the early 2000s. And here, the Water Convention, through this working group monitoring and assessment, has helped countries to set up joint monitoring and assessment systems, to set up joint early warning systems, and all this following the driving forces pressure state impact response framework, and also following a basin and integrated approach, etc., etc. And in this framework, already in the early 2000s, have been developed different guidance documents. For example, guidelines for the monitoring and assessment of transboundary and international lakes by a group of experts led by Finland, but with many other experts. And part A is a strategy document, and part B it contains of technical guidelines. So in following this, the guidelines have been developed on different other topics, which you can all find on our website, and which also include examples from lakes. Beyond that, we also have included different global transboundary lakes into our global network of basins working on climate change, such as the Lake Victoria Basin or the Lake Chad Basin. And we provide technical and political support to riparian countries upon request to develop cooperative arrangements for transboundary waters, including lakes. And if the countries ask for it, also facilitate cooperation and dialogue, for example, in Central Asia on the RLC. And in several of our pilot and field projects, we include different issues on lakes, such as in the Drin Basin in Southeastern Europe, or on the Lake Prespa, which is shared by Albania, Greece, and North Macedonia, where actually a new agreement has entered into force by those 3 countries just recently, a few years ago in 2019. Obviously, we cooperate also, since we are located in Geneva, with the International Commission for the Protection of Lake Geneva, since it's shared by France and Switzerland. And another example where we have been helping the countries to cooperate was several years ago on the Lake Pepsi, shared by Estonia and the Russian Federation, mainly focused on water quality and on fisheries management and sustainable development. So to conclude, I would like to invite you also to maybe suggest that we could actually establish closer cooperation and linkages. Now we are in the process of starting the development of our future program of work under the Water Convention. Our next meeting of the parties will be held in October next year in Slovenia. And the topic and several of the topics mentioned here, such as pollution, are coming up as an important priority. So I think there could be scope for more cooperation going forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Koppel. Now I'd like to invite Ms. Stephanie Smith from African Center for Aquatic Research and her co-presenter, Ms. Marie-Claire Dusabe, from African Center for Aquatic Research and Education and African Women in Science alumni. Stephanie and Maria, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having us today. It is such an honor to be here, surrounded by so many friends of lakes all around the world. It's been truly fascinating to hear about all the initiatives going on, so much synergy. Today, Marie-Claire and I are here to talk to you about the African Center for Aquatic Research and Education and our work there with a focus on SLM, which I will just say the letters because we all know what I'm talking about now. And today, I will do some of these slides, and my co-presenter Marie-Claire will do some others. And I just want to take a minute to say that as representatives of ACARE, which is the short way of saying that, we will talk about what's going on for the African Great Lakes. And then I will also take off my ACARE hat for 1 minute just to say a few words about another audience that I've been working with and very inspired by, which is youth. That will just be a quick minute. But we'll jump right into our content today. And I heard there's a special trick for how to change the slides. Ooh, and I think I got it. Okay. So Marie-Claire will introduce herself a bit more when she takes the podium. I work for ACARE as a consultant, as the strategic advisor. I also am a global water consultant, and I work in many other capacities. But for ACARE today, I want to point out the importance, the vital importance. People have talked today about the African Great Lakes, about ACARE and the extent of the work that's done there. We've got millions and millions and millions of Africans, and we want to see them being able to depend on healthy African Great Lakes for food, for clean water, for reliable employment that will support a climate of justice, democracy, and peace. And that says equality under there. The mission for ACARE is to create highly collaborative systems that strengthen science to positively affect policy and management for healthy African Great Lakes. We're going to talk about what that means, but because it's quick today, we also invite you to join us at our special session where we'll talk in more depth about the African Great Lakes, and that will be on Wednesday. So we'll do the best we can in a shorter time today. Our next presenter, my co-presenter, will take over for the next few slides. Marie-Claire.
Thank you so much. As Stefan presented me, I am Marie-Claire Dusabe. I am from Rwanda. Rwanda is in East Africa. But currently, I'm based in Germany. I'm doing my PhD at Justus Liebig University Gießen. So with the main goal of developing a lake biotic index for Alberta and Rift Valley lakes. So when we talk about African Rift Valley lakes, they were originally formed dates to 20 million years ago when tectonic plates from East Africa moved toward the northeast of the rest of East Africa. Then the movement formed the Great Rift Valley, which diverted the flow of rivers into depression, then developed the lakes. Yeah. So you can see the African Great Lakes. African Great Lakes, sorry. African Great Lakes, now IKEA is focusing on 7 Great Lakes. You can see them, Lake Albert, Edward, and so on. So Lake Victoria, I think a lot of you know it. Lake Victoria is the second largest lake in the world, the surface area. Also, Lake Tanganyika is the second deepest lake in the world. I think the first one is Lake Superior. And all these lakes are 10 riparian countries, so co-management is really hard. For example, Lake Tanganyika is bordered by 4 countries, which is really hard for co-management. So people, like almost 50 million people rely on these lakes for ecosystem services, such as food, recreation, transportation, and so on. And yeah, these lakes contribute more than 25% of the world freshwater. So we talk more about it, like Stefan said, on Wednesday. But we also want to mention that these lakes are quite different in terms of biodiversities. For example, Lake Tanganyika is really highly diverse with a lot of endemic species, while Lake Kivu is very low diverse because of having methane gas. So they are really quite different. So yeah, we'll talk more details on Wednesday. Thank you. Stephanie will continue the next slide.
Okay, I'm going to talk for just a minute about the programs that ACARE has so you can see some of the ways that the work gets done. ACARE has, as one of our signature programs, a set of advisory groups that span those 10 countries and 7 lakes that Marie-Claire just showed us. And so this is at our annual meeting that we had in 2023 in Dar es Salaam in February, and bringing together 140 scientists. I say scientists, some people are also lake managers, they are engaged with the government. So there are different roles that the scientists play, but bringing them together across these boundaries has been a tremendous asset. We started in 2019 with bringing these groups together. And I'm based in Chicago. I'm not based in Africa. So I'm in the US. And one of the things that's been so interesting is certainly a lot of my background in lakes has been on the North American Great Lakes, where we have 2 countries, and then also sovereign nations that are the native people in the US and Canada, both sides of the lakes. But that's not quite as many as trying to coordinate across 10 countries. So what's interesting with these advisory groups is that they meet monthly by Zoom, and then we meet once a year, and the advisory groups have agendas that they work toward accomplishing over the course of the year. And they learn to work together, as Marie-Claire said, across boundaries, which is no small challenge, as many of you can imagine in your work as well. Another program that I want to talk about is the African Women in Science program. It's actually how Marie-Claire and I met. This is our meeting story. You can see her, she's down in front in the beige jacket, but we met because this program, we work with cohort of women. We're working with our 3rd cohort of African women scientists who are early career. And part of the program is that we also meet online for capacity development, leadership programming. And then we also have a travel component. And so Maria-Claire and I got to travel in the US together with some other members of the cohort to exchange information across lake basins, across lakes in the US and Africa, which is one of the things that has been so valuable with ACARE, is the exchange of information across the different lakes. Another 3 programs I want to mention. I think it's very important to talk about the information and data program that ACARE is launching in February. It's a system that will put all publications, or all of the ones we can find, hard copy, soft copy, all the copies, in one place, in one system, so that for the first time, all of that research that's being done is able to be accessed online. The education and training program, this is a program that's in development. And that's, as you can see, thinking about how we can learn across borders. Some of the models that are being done here today, I'd love to talk more about them. It's really a great opportunity to think about how we can do this education and training work. This particular program is focused on scientists, early career scientists, and those who also need some special skills and training along the way. Our monitoring program is something I want to highlight. We did some work at the World Water Quality Alliance meeting that Nina talked about just before lunch. And at that meeting, we came together certainly to talk about world water quality, but we had a special session in the evenings where we started to develop the framework for what it looks like for the African Great Lakes to have a shared program for water quality monitoring. And Nina mentioned the African use case. We're building on that particular work to figure out how to do a better job of coordinating on that water quality monitoring. I will get it eventually in the right direction, but here we go. I want to just talk through a couple of things. These are familiar to you all, the letters A through F for the Sustainable Lake Resolution. A couple highlights for ACARE. So we don't, when we're working at ACARE, talk a lot about SLM. That's just not a term that has been used. And in fact, it was new to me until I met Walter Rast, who opened my eyes to that term. So what's been going on in the African Great Lakes region is aligned in many ways, but it's not using the exact framework. And in fact, thinking about ILBM, neither. So those terms are not terms that we've been working with in our community, and yet the actions that are being taken are similar. So I want to say a couple of, as I go through them just briefly, a few examples of how some of this is working. Marie-Claire will talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But one of the questions that we find ourselves asking are, certainly we see that there are some really great documents, some great PDFs. And I'm thrilled to hear about the online course, because one of the questions we have is about what are the tools we can use. Right now, what's happening in the African Great Lakes is that any of the lake management or lake basin management plans are not necessarily exactly they're not exactly the same with each other. They're not exactly the same as anyone else in the world. So how do we make some of those shifts? That's one of the questions we have. And what are the tools to be able to do that? As we talk about this particular one and thinking about some of the parallels between local communities and indigenous people in Africa, as we've talked about, Marie-Claire and I've discussed, and thinking about the fact that, the local communities, for the most part, are indigenous people in Africa. And thinking about what that means in terms of having the leadership be by African people. And that's something that's very important to ACARE, so that when we come in with documents or protocol or frameworks that are from outside of the countries in Africa, it's something that's very important to ACARE to make sure that those documents, that those processes are led by Africans making those decisions. And so thinking about how we work with existing tools to make sure that philosophy and those actions are still happening in that way. Something that's very important to both Marie-Claire and to me is engagement and capacity building. We see that happening around the African Great Lakes. It's not, in terms of community engagement, not a big focus for ACARE, but something that Marie-Claire and I are personally very passionate about with other projects that we do. The capacity building happens mostly with scientists, which is also very important for ACARE. I want to talk also, as we think about this, Marie-Claire and I can talk more about initiatives that do exist for local voices to be heard. However, they're not as widespread as they should be. And then just a couple more here, thinking about ACARE's really well aligned on this particular point of involving all stakeholders. in terms of research, academics, governmental institutions, NGOs. However, our network currently doesn't include private companies, which would be great. And I know there was a speaker who just talked about this and how helpful it is. So thinking about models to be able to do that, I think is really important. So when I say SLM isn't a term used, I just mean that the African Great Lakes communities haven't frequently been using that term, but we are working in that direction. And then I'll say in the last two here, ACARE is doing, as I said, with our annual meetings and with our ongoing monthly meetings, a great job of bringing together scientific discussions. And in many cases, the science policy link, it's really important and it's of great interest, but the tools to make those connections are not widely happening on the African Great Lakes. That said, there's a lot of potential. There's a lot of interest in making that happen, and finding the resources to do that is of great interest. I'll say with this slide that as we look at that idea of networking and collaboration, as you can probably tell from what I've said, that's a big strength of what ACARE is doing, is bringing together communities of scientists to work together and to harmonize, as I said, the data collection for water quality. That's a project that is just beginning this year. And then thinking also about how we bring together all of the research papers that have been done. I mentioned that launch will be happening in February of the new website that will house all of those. So I am going to turn this slide over to Marie-Claire to talk a little bit about some of the examples.
So talking about the Sustainable Lake Management Plan, we have 5 examples, like 5 lakes among the 7 Great Lakes that ACARE is focusing on for research. So we have Lake Albert and Edward. It still have a plan, or with Leaf too, that is where we have a plan, but the implementation is still lacking because of the fundings. While Lake Kivu has also a plan which was in place 2010, and the implementation has been going on, but focusing on methane gas extraction management. Then Lake Tanganyika has also a plan in place with the Lake Tanganyika Authority and Lake Victoria, but the challenge is that they are all still in the plan except Lake Kivu. They are all still in the plan. The implementation is still not clear yet because of the fundings. So we really want to focus by encouraging the acceleration of the actions by also searching the funds. Okay, sorry. Yeah. Sorry. Stefan is going to continue by talking about on the combination.
So you see here, there are several recommendations. Somehow they're all showing up as number 1. Before, when I made this presentation, it said 1, 2, 3, but they are all really important. So maybe we should just say top priorities, all of them. Okay, so the need for a template for integrated lake basin management. And so this, I know these things exist. And when I say this, and also leadership should say leadership from Africans who are already doing this. One of the questions we had about feasibility is, knowing that the African Great Lakes are very different from each other. We have the world's largest desert lake, Lake Turkana, for example, and thinking about the feasibility for that, but also because a lot of this work is in process. How do we take some of the templates that exist and bring them to the work that's already in process and coordinate that? That's a question, open question. Come talk to us later if you have ideas. Updating and harmonizing existing plans, these two things go together. So trying to figure out a way to do that better. And then, of course, the financing that we just mentioned earlier, super important. And thinking about funding sources across all of these countries. It's a big deal. That's a lot of funding, and it's a lot of countries. And sometimes it's hard to find either that scale of funding or funding that is able to fund multiple countries in that way. So these are not as important because they say 4 and 5. Just kidding. They're all important. And as I said, community engagement strategies, so important and key. So one of the things that we want to figure out is, as we've been listening today, thinking about the successful models that are out there, and then also thinking about some of the tools, number 5 here, for how to report and manage progress for evaluation and learning across borders. So it's really great to hear about all the things that are happening, but it would be really nice to have a tool that allows us to measure progress across all of these different lakes and think about how we're regularly sharing our successes and our learnings so that we can accelerate progress. We don't have time to be waiting, as the point has been made. And one thing I want to just add here is that Thomas just mentioned thinking about a global lakes coalition and thinking about that idea of how we bring together all the work that we're doing in a sustained way is very, very important. And tapping into not just the scientists that we have in the room or in our connections, but also just people power, youth, our educators, people who are maybe not in this room today. And in the lakes and water community, I find we speak a lot to each other, but how do we break out of those silos to tap into people power so that we are able to really make the change and scale that change up? It's really critical that we think about these things so that we can also make sure that we're working with youth, a very both inspiring audience, but also very action-oriented in many cases, and people who feel the weight of environmental issues very heavily. When a lot of the youth work that I do, and youth who are here in this room and who I've been working with, who will have a session on Wednesday, there's so many great ideas in that group. And I look out here and I look at this table that I'm sitting at, and I'm thinking, where are the youth at this table of speakers? We need to be thinking about how we amplify those voices. It's very critical. And then I want to say, okay, let's do the Lake Day. It's great, but we have to move beyond the Lake Day. We have to scale it up. We don't have time to wait. We need to engage on a very big way a lot of the audiences that are out there in the world who care, but they don't know quite what to do and how to channel their actions. And that's something that we can help them do. So I just want to, as I turn it over to Marie-Claire to close, just say that we can do this together, and it needs to be coordinated, and we have the power here in this room to get those actions started. Thank you, and over to you, Marie-Claire.
Thank you so much. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So we'd like to thank you by also inviting you in our annual meeting for African Great Lakes Stakeholders Networking, which is going to happen in Zambia, in Lusaka, next year in February, from 5th to 7th. Yeah. And we thank you so much for your attention. Merci beaucoup. I've messed up.
Thank you very much, Stephanie and Marie-Claire. Thank you. Okay, so now I'm going to show a video made by ILEC Secretariat with contributions from participating members of the workshop titled The SLM Implication of the Lake Biwa Yodo River Basin Management. Dr. Nakamura, could you make a comment about this?
Of course, after this, we'll have the panel discussion with broad participation, very interactive discussion. And one contribution before then that I thought would be very important, that has not really come out very strongly, is the, like AK was saying, we're talking about, a great variety of interest, cultural background, geographic background, whatnot. So we have to really expand the scope in terms of spatial and perhaps perceptional scope in cultural background, so on and so forth. But one thing that we think is very important and strikingly missing is the temporal scope, not so much to look forward to, but what has been accomplished? What has been the experience? And I think the unique thing about the Lake Biwa is that you can go back centuries to review, structure our conceptual framework and see how this evolved into today and what would be the sort of a possible extension of that momentum into the future. That really needs to be very much part of our scope. So this video was put together very much in a hurry. I think in the last 1 month or so, we did that, and we have the ILEC Secretariat working very hard. The general right there, sitting there, he was very orchestrating this activity. We had a workshop, which is completely apart from that scope. They were not really aware what their workshop out would be presented in the form that I'm presenting using this video. That has to be integrated into the long temporal scope. So anyway, that may in fact be a very important subject area that we need to discuss in the panel discussion. And let's see how this will go. And maybe I'll follow up later the contextual implication of what needs to be done now that we have this SLN. So the title was, what was that? The SLN integration of the Lake Biwa-Yodo Basin Management. Worth a really interesting workshop.
Lake Biwa, formed some 4 million years ago, is located in the west-central part of Japan. The environment was serene, with many small attached lakes around the main lake. The shoreline and the surrounding wetlands were covered with natural vegetation such as reed beds, providing for natural purification capacity and serving for fish breeding grounds. People settled around the lake some 20,000 years ago. The water from the lake and inflowing rivers served for drinking, cooking, and washing, as well as for harvesting fish and shellfish. With time, paddy fields were introduced and settlements began to form around the lake. Blessed with abundant resources for daily life, the population around the lake continued to increase. The paddy fields were small and depended on rainwater. The surrounding mountain ranges were typically covered with deciduous broadleaf trees, but there were also mountain ranges notably covered with Japanese cedar and cypress trees. The Tanakami mountain range, in the southernmost part of the lake basin, is one such example, known to have been extensively covered with prime quality cypress trees. In as early as the 7th through 8th century, the Tanakami mountain cypress trees were cut down to be shipped on the rivers via the cedar rafts, all the way to the ancient capital of Nara, for use mainly as temple and shrine pillars. Among the most famous of such examples are the pillars for constructing the housing structure for the giant Buddha in Nara. Those mountain ranges were gradually denuded over the next centuries due to the continuing deforestation for constructing wooden buildings and for household uses. The geological characteristics of these mountain ranges led to extensive soil erosion, with little or no self-recovery having taken place over the course of succeeding centuries, up to the late 19th century, when the human interventions with introduced technology from overseas finally led to successful reforestation. Settlements around the lake continued to grow and trade began. The people started to transport goods on the lake, initially using wooden rafts, and later on using small boats that were manually rowed. As trade expanded, the importance of the lake as a means of transport grew more and more. Port towns developed, and the lake became an important transportation route for trade linking regions on the west and north of the lake. Rice was transported across the lake for payment of tax to the rulers. With time, lake transportation was further developed, and many boats for transporting goods were active on the lake. Paddy fields became large in scale, and rainwater alone was not enough, especially in the dry season. Conflicts over water use often occurred among neighboring villages, sometimes resulting in casualties. Although negotiations were held, securing water remained an important and difficult issue. The conflicts over water use lasted for centuries, and the society developed mechanisms through which these conflicts were managed and resolved. Population continued to increase around the land and within the lake basin. Forests were actively felled, not only as a source of construction materials, but also as a source of firewood fuel. Deforestation continued, and many mountains in the southern region were left bare. People living around the lake suffered from flooding for a very long time. The practical solution was to dredge the only single outflowing river in order to increase the discharge capacity. However, for a long time, dredging of the outflowing river was not possible due to downstream flooding concerns and military reasons. It was only after a very severe flood in 1896, in which some communities around the lake were kept in water for more than half a year, that dredging of the outflowing river was done, and also a manually operated weir was installed to control floods. To meet the growing demand for rice, paddy fields were expanded, and water was systematically secured from dams and reservoirs. Hence, some of the historic water use conflicts were addressed. After the end of the Second World War in 1945, the country entered a period of unprecedented rapid economic growth. The economy of the lake region grew, and there was a rapid conversion of land use from agriculture and forestry to settlement and industry. Factories were established around the lake, and population continued to increase. Management of human waste in the growing population centers also became an important issue. In some high-density population centers, human waste was collected and used as agricultural manure. In other urban areas, untreated sewage was discharged into the lake, polluting it. Even toxic pollution originating from untreated or inadequately treated industrial wastewater became a controversial issue in the lake basin. As socioeconomic development in the lake region continued, the lake began to show signs that it was reaching its limits. First, a musty odor was detected in the downstream tap waters whose sources were traced back as the lake water. Then, pollution in some areas of the lake led to some bathing resorts being closed. Finally, a water bloom occurred in the lake in 1977 for the very first time, and the surface of the lake turned red. It became apparent that the lake had become eutrophic because of increased outputs of nutrients, some coming from the daily lives of the residents, such as use of phosphorus-containing detergents. Aggrieved by this finding, local housewives around the lake campaigned against the use of detergents and instead advocated for the use of soap through what is famously called the soap movement. This soap movement led to the enactment of a local eutrophication control ordinance in 1980, which banned the sale and use of phosphorus-containing detergents in the lake area. The eutrophication control ordinance had major impacts on management of water quality, not only in the local lake region, but also nationally. What was unique about the soap movement was the symbolism and spirit associated with it. Thanks to the movement, a strong partnership between the local government and citizens was established. What have we learned from the story of Lake Biwa? Among other things, we learned that the lake has been supporting the livelihoods of people in Shiga as well as in the downstream regions, that there have been various man-nature interactions regarding the resource values of Lake Biwa and its basin, and that its land-water systems have undergone significant transformations during the process. Having unexpectedly experienced red tide incidents in the late 1970s and the early 80s, it became very clear to the basin people that they would never see a blue and transparent Lake Biwa unless its water environment was drastically improved. Thus began the dawn of Lake Biwa water environment management. Being blamed for the lax efforts until then that had led to the red tide incidents, the Shiga government decided to launch an all-out effort to strengthen the capacity in two key areas of water environment management, namely, much more stringent regulatory enforcement regarding polluting industries and acceleration of sewerage service provisions to the municipal populations. Very fortunately, two pieces of national legislation enacted in the 1970s helped the Shiga government meet what seemed to be an insurmountable challenge to reverse the degrading trend of the Lake Biwa water environment. They are the Lake Law and the LBCDP Law, in short. The Lake Law deals only with Lake Biwa water quality improvement, while the LBCDP Law deals with infrastructure development in the Lake Biwa Yodo River Basin, including construction of the Lake Biwa Regional Sewerage System. The Lake Law was designed to help the government reduce eutrophication-related pollution, in harmony with a variety of other legislation on pollution control efforts. The LBCDP Law was enacted to realize water resources development and flood and drought control for both the upstream Shiga and the downstream Osaka regions. It was inaugurated in 1972 and completed in 1997, with special financial arrangements involving the national government and the downstream government. Specifically, it included the construction of Lake Biwa Regional Sewerage System. Some LBCDP construction works adversely affected the ecosystem of Lake Biwa. As an example, the lakeshore was transformed from a natural shoreline to an artificial one, leading to the loss of sound ecosystems. The return flows of the LBCDP irrigation projects also began to contaminate the lake water with silt and agricultural chemicals. Other adverse impacts included frequent occurrences of blue-green algal blooms, degradation of lake bottom sediments, and an explosive growth of submerged water weeds. During the 30-year period from 1970 to 2000, the overall lake water quality gradually improved because of the various environmental policy measures and the sewerage system constructed in the Lake Biwa Comprehensive Development Project. In the meantime, however, the scale of ecosystem degradation was far greater than expected, resulting in people wondering exactly what went wrong and how such a trend may be reversed in the future, opening the door of the era of lake water environment management beyond 2000. A new plan, called the Lake Biwa Comprehensive Conservation Project, LBCCP, was inaugurated in 1999. It only involves Shiga Prefecture and not the downstream government. The plan, provisionally set at a 50-year time horizon, is aimed at restoration of Lake Biwa ecosystem health. The key feature of the LBCCP is the transformation of societal value systems, particularly of a socioeconomic and cultural nature. It has many commonalities with the concept of ILBM, wherein the planning gear, signifying the government-led planning implementation of policies and programs, has to be soundly meshed with the governance gear, the broad initiatives and engagements by society at large in the basin and beyond, for many decades into the future.
Through the previous sections, we learned that the Lake Biwa and Yodo River Basin has experienced a long and intricate history of man-nature interactions, and that the sustainability issues and challenges we face today are inseparable from that history. We also learned that there have been major policy and institutional development initiatives spearheaded by national and local governments over the past several decades, and that there have been various response actions from the basin communities, for or against. Also grown significantly over the past decades have been the roles played by communities and individual citizens, non-governmental and private sectors. as well as scientific institutions of various disciplines, with the involvement of students and youths in many cases. In one of the recent workshops participated by representatives from universities and institutions engaged in the management of Lake Biwa, Yodo River Basin, shared a range of scientific research and social mobilization activities that have significant implications to the SLM issues and challenges facing the basin. For example, a multidisciplinary group of research teams from a university along the Yodo River surveyed the location-specific ecosystem service values, naturally and artificially endowed. They include townships with a unique history of industrial development, historical monuments related to water management, navigation, ecosystem conservation and restoration, and the centers of cultural tradition and religions, all about their SDG implications. A research institute to undertake monitoring of Lake Biwa water environments has also been playing a focal role in facilitating the citizen-driven community actions to look after the lake environment situation in close collaboration with the Shiga government. In the process, they have developed the SDG concept, of which the goals and targets are specific to Lake Biwa. This Lake Biwa program named the Mother Lake Goals MLG's approach, and it is attracting interest elsewhere. The Lake Biwa, Yodo River Basin accommodates many public and private universities and research institutions having collaboration programs with Asian and African counterparts. The participants from such universities and research institutions shared their ongoing program activities, many focusing on Lake River coastal basin management involving the counterpart organizations and the respective national governments. The cases reported include research collaboration on comprehensive assessment of their water resources and water environments in Vietnam, on participatory risk assessment of environmental sanitation in some African countries, and on risk assessment of antibiotic resistance genes ARGs in some Asian lakes and marine environments. These international collaborations on research, education, and training benefit the collaborated institutions, the basin communities at large, and their governments, as well as their counterparts in the Lake Biwa, Yodo River Basin. Overall, the messages of this workshop may be categorized into the following three commonly recognized issue domains, which are very closely related to those facing SLM. The first issue pertains to the recognizing that water management has been strongly tied to regional development in the case of Lake Biwa, Yodo River Basin, as are most other cases globally. The specific points explicitly or implicitly recognized include: 1. The historically evolved water management system has contributed significantly to the healthy development of the basin communities. 2. The reform and rejuvenation of urban infrastructure won't be successful without those of its water system. 3. The reuse and recycling of water is possible only through realization of the healthy water environment of the entire Lake River coastal basin system. The second issue domain pertains to the need for climate change resilient development of the basin system. The specific points recognized include: 1. The value of historical experience in adaptation and mitigation of water-related risks such as droughts and floods. 2. The need to enhance the basin-wide flood management in anticipation of the more frequent occurrences of extreme climate-driven events. And 3. The importance of managing together the water that flows through the entire Lake River coastal basin system. The third issue domain pertains to the capacity building of the collaborating institutions and the benefit of mutual learning by the collaborating and collaborated institutions. The specifically recognized points include the importance of the management approach. 1. Based on scientific assessment of environmental phenomena with appropriately maintained and calibrated instruments and equipment. 2. Appreciation both by the collaborating and collaborated institutions of the value of mutual learning. And 3. Involving the youths and students both for implementing projects and for their prospective future roles. Finally, this gathering was concluded with the following generic but important observations by the participants. 1. Transgenerational transfer of historical experiences over time. 2. Scientific approach with hard data complemented by socio-cultural actions and sentiments necessary for promoting the proactive citizen initiatives and youth actions. And 3. Sharing of the intrinsic values is fundamental to fostering cultural and artistic senses that are inherent to such socio-ecological complexes as the lake, river, and coastal basin systems exemplified by the Lake Biwa-Yodo River system. Hopefully, the above observations will contribute to the fruitful discussions elsewhere on the SLM issues and challenges facing lake-river coastal basin systems globally.
Thank you for watching. And then I thank you all wonderful invited presentations on further advancing SLM experience globally. Okay, welcome back, everyone. I hope you had a refreshing break. And before we proceed, let me introduce our new facilitator for this session, Mr. Andras Nagy, and former Director, UNESCO International Hydrological Program. And then also I invite Dr. Rust and Dr. Nakamura to coordinate this session. And first I'll hand the microphone over to Dr. Nakamura.
Yes, thank you very much, Rika. This next maybe 45 minutes or so, we would like to have sort of a very lively discussion. We originally thought the panel may be useful, but I think Professor Nagy and Orta pretty much lined up the issues to deliver it on. But I also want to draw your attention to the people sitting in the back over there. Those people were just as vocal as Lenny if you give the microphone. That's why we did not give the microphone to them. So, but in the meantime, while we have this discussion, some points of importance, we already asked them to come in and contribute, so he would have easier time to make this session very lively, useful. And in addition, we had not being able to give time to Malaysia. I would like to have Zati to make some mention of the Malaysian national program, but along the line that maybe the discussion will go to that direction. One additional thing, that some of the cycle members will have keynote addresses tomorrow. I think the Dan Orago will have the African Great Lakes region, East African Great Lakes region keynote address, and Sandra, she's not here, will be making keynote addresses. So they may not necessarily come in, but you may also have time to listen to them in the context of whatever we are discussing on. Okay, with that, and also we have some additional presentations in the main conferences, some of the cycle members, like Chapala and India, like Chirika and so on and so forth. So, but all that background, we have to depend very much on Walter and Andras to frame the discussion so that we will be able to come to a very good conclusion of the important colloquium. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Masai. Dear colleagues, I'm just the traffic cop here. The discussion is all yours, and I'll try to recall a couple of very interesting, if not provocative, statements that we have heard so far with respect to lakes. Perhaps, and I have to apologize for that, some of you may have problems in pronouncing this terrible Hungarian double name. My African students used to call me Professor András something. So that will do for the rest of the. Oh yeah. I served, as some of you might know, colleagues whom I met before. I served almost 30 years at the UN, particularly at UNESCO. I was the Secretary General of the International Hydrological Program, from which you can concur that or identify that I'm a hardcore hydrologist, modeling and databases and all that sort of thing. And I got involved in lake studies as well. So when I completed my UNESCO term and I was working together with Ken at IHE in Delft, I returned, confessed all my sins, and returned back to academia. So I'm a professor of what is called environmental and water policies and the UNESCO chair in water conflict management. That's where lakes are coming in, because here is this wonderful lake next to you, loaded with conflicts. And the conflicts are between the social use, the environmental use, the recreational use, the water supply use, the fisheries use, and those characters are being strong individuals. They are, head on all the time. And also, this is not bragging, but you have to know all my sins. I'm chairing now the Future Earth Sustainable Water Future Program, which will have a great deal to do with what we discussed this afternoon. And indeed, the discussion in the coming bit more than 3/4 of an hour will be centered on how we can connect sustainable lake management to the UN Sustainable Development Goals, where the lakes were by and large omitted, and I had my own share in that, because we concentrated essentially on SDG 6, which was really focused on water supply and sanitation, and later on, a bit reluctantly, on climate change. However, it is water that is the carrier of all the impacts, or not all, 80% of the impacts of climate change, including the impacts of climate change and climate variability on lakes. So this is not the same business on the one hand. On the other hand, if you make projections for the coming 100 years of the population increases, 100 years from now, we will be, and these are pretty reliable UN predictions, there will be 12 billion human beings, which is the tipping point. So that will have an incredible impact on how lakes will be used, lakes will be managed. And if you are beyond the tipping point, no soil, terrible degradation of the waters, then our grandchildren will have difficulties. We have already discussed this morning that of all the waters of the world, it's only 2.5% that is fresh water. Of that, 60% is frozen in the two poles and in the permafrost in Siberia. And what remains of 90% is under the ground. So altogether we have, and this is, my students don't remember anything what I tell them except this figure. We have 0.007% freshwater, surface water that is available. This is what they named the James Bond phenomenon. This is 0.007%. Not only that, which is 42 cubic kilometers, of which what you have in front of you, Lake Balaton, is only 2 cubic kilometers. But 90% of that 42,000 cubic kilometers is Atlantic waters. It's in lakes. And this is what we have omitted to deal with over the past, well, almost 30 years. The other bad news for today is that if you look at the Sustainable Development Goals implementation with a view towards the 2030 deadline, where all the promises ought to be met. Now, in that road, we are at 12%. So 88% of the job is still to be done. This is a major difficulty. At the same time, when we have the political turmoils and wars that we are witnessing. So it's a very critical situation, and I would like to bring out your opinion in that regards. What I would like to start with is I gathered this afternoon and in the morning that there is a disconnect between water science, water policy, and down the road, far away, politics that deals with water. The huge gap. The question is, how can we close that? When it comes to science, often we say that, oh, pretty much we have done our job. Over the past 30 years, the development was so powerful that we don't have any more data problems, rather the opposite. Every day we have an exabyte of data coming from satellites with respect, which are hydrologically relevant. And the problem is, how do we filter out the information? Yet, we have a problem to connect with the policymakers. Yet, we have a problem to come up with models that are assessing the situation in a fair way and provide it to the public. And how can we convince the public on the importance of water? Well, World Water Day was one instrument when we started way back in 1992 in Rio de Janeiro to create an instrument that would raise the public awareness with respect to water. And it took us at least 50 caipirinhas until we came to the obvious that you have to give something to the public that is sexy, that they understand. Nobody believed, however, that 30 years after the World Water Day will be such a fantastic event with such an impact that we have at national level and at regional level. So perhaps we ought to do something similar with respect to lakes. So on the first discussion group, I would very much like to discuss with you and hear your opinion with respect to the science policy gap. How can we solve that? And how can we bridge over? How can we convince the policy people about the power of science? And second is, how can we connect to the public? Assuming that, which is a very strong assumption, that this world is democratic. We see, that more and more it is not democratic. But in democratic societies, politicians are listening to the public. So if we would like to reach out to the politicians, we have to reach to the politicians through the public. So I would like to, this is completely voluntary in the sense that I talked to Lenny, for instance, that she was kind enough to volunteer to share with our views on the science policy interface, please.
Yeah, this is actually based on, thank you, based on experience in my more than 40 years on lake basin management. And we always advocate that the decisions should be evidence-based, science-based. And it's hard to sell that to decision makers, to politicians, because the time frame is different from the time frame of a scientist. For example, we implement this kind of regulation, and they expect that by next year there will be improvement on the water quality of the lake. But that is not so, because of the integrating nature and things accumulate over time. But in the process, like, I have to learn also to live within that system, not to compromise science, but more or less come out with a time frame like, okay, we can do it stepwise. We can do it gradual. We cannot, it's not just like one sweep that you can do it, but it's always a work in progress. And one of the experience that is striking to me is when we got involved with a project funded by the Research Institute for Humanity and Nature in Japan. And we talked to the mayors. Actually, the project is already there, approved, the methodology. But we respect the suggestions of politicians. We respect the suggestions of the community. And when they saw that their suggestions are becoming part of the project, then things become better because they have that sense of ownership. They feel that they belong. So it's not a stringent process that even if you have that approved methodology, you have to make them feel that you're working on the project together with them. And it makes a lot of sense for them to see their suggestions into the implementation of the project. And I think that's a lessons learned for me too. Like, as a scientist, you don't need to be always on a hard sell. So you have to more or less work with the system, and patience is a virtue. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Alejandro. In Mexico, there are a number of laws related to water, the use of water, including lakes and reservoirs. Yet there are serious problems there. What would be your comment on those?
Okay. Well, first of all, I think that what we are doing here today, it can bring some hope of things getting better. But something that is common in Mexico and some other cases that we were looking today, in the case of the housewives in the Lake Biwa, and also with the situation in the Great Lakes, is that conflict, it's starting fire for development processes. And I think that science needs to pay attention to work together with different groups, not only politicians, because basically politicians, they don't do anything by themselves. I mean, they depend on the public approbation. So if there is not a pressure group to move things, basically they will stay in the same page because they don't have something to make them move. In that aspect, there are some examples in Mexico, even if it's a problematic situation, that show that we can move besides this short-term perception that most of politicians have. Basically, as Lenny said, if they want something to be implemented and to have very quick responses, and that basically is impossible to reach. But paying attention and also adapting, it's possible to move. Mexican law forbids something to create something similar to the authority, the basin authority that is working in other countries. Canada is a good example for Mexico, but there are also these authorities working in other countries. Philippines is a good example also. But the law in Mexico forbids this to be created. So scientists, researchers came with the idea of making an analysis about the law and to try to create something similar to the authorities, but without that name. And so the intermunicipalities were created, and the intermunicipalities start as a kind of experiment. And now we have 16 of them working, and with a population close to 9 million people under this kind of figure. So I think that this is a very good example about the things that could be done. But basically, I think that to conclude that we need to be very creative about trying to match what the politicians understand and can be interested into, and also how scientists could provide information, not only the hard facts, but also the social aspects of it.
Well, one good example in Latin America, at least that I have seen, is in Brasilia. In Brazil, the National Water Authority is establishing policies that are based on science. So when I was there, to my greatest surprise, these people knew what they were talking about, and the politicians were listening to them. You know, the average life expectancy of a politician, as a politician, is 40 years, if he or she is lucky. And most of the time they just, you know, run for a re-election. But I saw a high degree of continuity in the Brazilian water management. How has it been achieved? What is the example?
Thanks. I would like to say that in Brazil, we have a very good laws about water management, water quality, and so on. And we have a national agency for water control, but it's much easier to have the agency and the legislation, and much more difficult is to implement this in a municipal area and control area. Okay, we have a hard time during last 4 years, and almost this work was lost. Okay, it's in a political level. We are not stopping. We come back some decades, but now we are recovering our hope about to work better with the environmental issues. But I would like to emphasize, in my perspective and experience, more than 3 decades of experience, work with water qualities issues and so on. I also involved with the health ministry about drinking water quality too. In Latin America, I can say that the main trouble about water quality is not the legislation, is not the regulation process, but the poverty. Because when you talk about justice, about climate justice, and about water distribution, we are talking also about the lack of water quality. You consider quality when you have the minimum quantity for your life. Okay, so it's a difficult thing to talk about with the stakeholders about the importance of water and so on. First of all, they need to believe that we are talking about some value for them. If they need to fight every day to have a plate of food, I'm not talking about the exception. I am talking about, for example, the community that lives around Rio de Janeiro City or São Paulo City, the biggest cities in Latin America, in South America, and around 3 million people doesn't have any guarantee that they have water. No, doesn't matter which kind of water. Okay, they don't have sanitation, they don't have food. So I think in Latin American perspective, we need to work so hard with education process to give voice for that people. If the people doesn't know their power or their voice can be listened, they never use this. Even we have a good legislation, even we have a good agency to control things like that, we need to translate quickly and better our concerns and listen much more than speak what they need to save our aquatic environment. It's so far from their reality to talk about water quality, lakes importance, and so on. Okay.
Yeah, well, as far as I know, the Brazilian water legislation is the most modern water law in the whole world. It's very flexible, very adaptive, and it recognizes the big problem. You mentioned the climate injustice, and I was in Rio de Janeiro a few years back when a flash flood occurred, and I've seen that the favelas were washed away. And again, who is a loser? Well, the poor. And in that regard, that is a major injustice. Please go ahead.
Yeah, for example, we are talking now about climate change, extreme events. Could you believe that the biggest rivers in Amazonia area now is drying?
Sure.
We are not talking about a creek or a small river. We are talking about Negro River, Solimões River. It's completely dry.
Yeah.
So you can imagine beyond the environmental trouble, the social trouble we have.
Absolutely.
And the opposite point, the south area in Brazil, the east area in Brazil is completely flooded.
That's exactly the point. But somehow, I think we failed basically to explain to the political community that 80% of the climate change impacts are manifested through with and by water, and B, the hydrological cycle has fundamentally changed and is changing in the sense that the probability of the extremes is going up, yet the amount of water is the same. So we will have more floods, but at the same time we will have more droughts. And in the Latin American continent and in Brazil, it's very clearly seen, and even in a small country like this one, this part, which the Hungarians call the civilized part, because this was a part of the Roman Empire, versus the those guys who are coming from far away, they will be dry, and this will be even better. So within a relatively small hydrological unit, this change of the extremes. Why? Because the hydrological cycle has accelerated. There's proof now to see that. Net result of that is that humanity will need more reservoir space, more lentic waters are needed. Are we prepared? How that thinking can be incorporated into national strategical plans? For instance, Ajit, how is it being done in South Central Asia?
Yes. After the SLM, this resolution, I was trying to look at some of the government in South Asian countries. I found that there's a distinct divide between the water policy looks after the river and reservoirs, but the lakes are taken care of by the environment ministries, and they don't talk to each other, though they're just stark realization that the lakes are very important from the climate change perspective. In some of the ministry, like urban development ministry, in India, they've gone in a big way to restore all the water bodies and wetlands in the urban landscape. And they found that is perhaps the most cost-effective way of mitigation of climate change because the rainfall pattern changes. But what surprised me, recently I'm also a consultant to the World Bank. So 3,000 reservoirs in India where they did the assessment and the bathymetry. They found that they have lost within 30 to 40 years. They're not very old dams or reservoirs. More than 35% storage capacity is lost, live storage is lost, which is really, kind of quite alarming. Because of sedimentation, because they never manage the reservoir basin. They only focus only at their reservoir. So they wanted some money for desiltation, and when they calculated, the amount was astronomical. Nobody can fund that much. Yeah. So these sort of kind of policy challenges, like the water policy need to be holistic, because the continuum between the lakes, because this is a network, and if it is taken care of properly, I think then both from the pollution point of view as well as the sedimentation things can be taken care of, but that holistic approach is still lacking. And one thing I think I'll just step into their domain. Once Professor Nakamura was there, about how to sensitize the policymakers, because I was a manager of a lake, and my chairman was the chief minister, the province, with the head of the province. So I introduced I call it participatory research. where what you said, the politician actually, kind of, they listen to people, not to the bureaucrat or scientist. So I said, whatever research would go on in the lake, the whoever does it, the community has to be, they should know why it is happening, because ultimately it's their money, taxpayer money. So the outcome of the research, they would be translating into practice. So the real community. So once the chief minister came to know that, yes, we prepared a ecosystem health report card with the Maryland University. So then again, you have to, what Lenny said in the morning, you have to make it, the format should be so simple that it can catch their imagination. Like we gave A, B, C, D score and color for the illiterate, lake basin community. So he came and he was very happy when he saw, instead of about 10 or 20 parameters were, kind of synthesized into this score. So what I just want to communicate that, okay, there's nothing wrong with them, but only thing is that as a scientist or, kind of as a manager, we have to also think of how best we can communicate in such a way that they can assimilate and they can appreciate it. And here, I think in all the South Asian countries, I'm finding that till now that divide is there. The SLM resolution, people are not yet sensitized, and many of the countries not yet reached the ministry. Even water ministry, they are not very, kind of, when I spoke to even the secretaries, they were not aware about it. So I believe that to make it policy relevant, we have to devise some mechanism so that it goes to the national government and to the right kind of ministry, the water ministry, so that it is integrated into the water policy. Till now, it is not got into the water policy of any of the South Asian countries.
Well, absolutely. Thank you so much for bringing this into the discussion. Normally, I'm passionately bashing the politicians. It's fun, but we are culpable. We are culpable because our communication experiences and our communication practices are very weak. We are simply not able to transmit the drama of water to the political community, and they are eager to listen to us. And when they ask a question, well, I did the same thing. Well, there is a hyperbolic differential equation which has boundary conditions, and we can solve it. And then I lost the person. So how can we communicate in a powerful language which is yet not denying the principles of scientific approach? I think for all of us, this is a big challenge. You are just exercising, or you would like to talk?
A good point. I remember Lenny once suggesting that maybe we need to have some sort of short course for politicians. But what you say is true. And in our universities, when we're training scientists and so forth, we never teach them how to talk to people. They put all their scientific work and it goes in another journal where other scientists read it. And whether or not the politicians ever get it is it's a sort of a two-way street. Yes, we all think they're dumb because they drive us crazy, but we don't know how to communicate with them either. Right. And I was going to ask Ajit, you said the rivers and the lakes people don't talk to each other very much or at all. Do you know what the original rationale was for separating, those two water systems into different agencies? And did it make any sense?
Well, with all due respect to our Japanese friends, this is basically the situation in Japan, that the Ministry of MLIT is responsible through the River Bureau to the river matters, and the Environmental Ministry is responsible to the lake management issues. So there is even in a most developed, highly sophisticated, industrialized countries, there is still an institutional contradiction, to put it mildly. How do you say that?
Let me clarify this point. In Japan, the situation in Japan, MLIT, Ministry of Land and Infrastructure, has covered the both river and the lakes because the under the institutional arrangement, the registry, the scope covers the lakes within river. The river sort of the definition. Lakes belong to river as a whole. That is the situation. That means the no discrepancy between lakes and the river at the that organization, Ministry of Infrastructure. And the Ministry of the Environment is in charge, responsible for quality, the environmental quality, the water quality. Let me correct me, Mr. Oi. In this regard, the two ministries are working together within with a different portfolio. That in that case, there are some not the conflict, but the sometimes we miss the good communication. However, nowadays, as Mr. Oi introduced us in this morning, that is the how do you say river water circulate law, which covers the upstream to downstreams quality and quantity. In this regard, it's getting closer and closer. But anyway, may I ask you to further point?
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Takemoto-san, for your clarification. And I have nothing to add. Yeah, actually, yes, the coordination between the different ministries sometimes headache for us. But I'm sure that you know, our relationship is getting better because of the integrated law for the water circulation works quite well. And also, I would like to stress that on the very local levels, we have very good cooperation or collaboration. You know, Sia Prefecture and the Ministry of the Environment, and also the local branch of the MLIT works together to you know, to have a better Biwa Lake environment. So I think you know, in Japan the situation is getting better. Thank you.
Well, it's interesting everywhere. I mean, it's only, well, almost 60 years. 60 years ago in Mar del Plata, the principles of integrated water management were born. And that was a full-fledged, the first full-fledged intergovernmental UN conference. The second was in last March. And that conference called the governments, and the governments approved and agreed with that in full consensus, that there is a need to have integrated water resources management, including the institutions. Now, 60 years after, in this country, for instance, there is one ministry that handles water supply. There's another one that handles treatment, sewage treatment. There's another one that deals with irrigation. There's a third one that deals with floods. There's a fourth one that deals with the impacts of climate change. There's a fifth one that deals with groundwater management. So what we do, although we talk a lot, what we do is a clear-cut example of disintegrated water management. And then we felt, and we feel, the profession, and you know, I'm an academic, I can say anything. So I say that this is the obstacle of any further development. So we have to really deal with the institutional issues. Please, Stephanie.
Thank you. I would just like to say a couple words about, from the US side, some of the things that probably Emily can also speak to in terms of messaging from between politicians and people. And I just want to talk for a moment about what Adelina said earlier, and also what Sandra mentioned about what is it that people care about and what is going to speak to them. And in some cases, it's economics. And so when scientists try to solve problems in their own silo without involving, whether it's educators or economists, people who can speak different languages and tie those pieces together. So for example, in the Great Lakes region in North America, there has been messaging related to how much return. So for every $1, for example, that we put into the North American Great Lakes, we get a return of a $2 return. Basically, we're doubling our investment in the longer term. And this is some of the messaging that is, I haven't been quite as current on that, but has been used in the past. And talking about that has helped people to see water as a unifier, and helping to see everyone is concerned about that economic impact. Everyone is concerned about health, their own health and the health of their families. And while it's true that people don't have time to think about, people outside of this room don't have time to think about and talk about all of the wonderful things that we know and the subtleties and the science, but they do have time to think about money and health, because those are very key elements for survival. So we think about how our language can tie into what those cares are for people. I think that's very important. And then also I want to just mention that helping people to see across borders that they have a common vision and that there is something that they can be working towards together. This can be very helpful. This is one of the things that we used very early on when we brought many countries together, 10 countries for the African Great Lakes. We asked them to think about the common vision. And they were sitting 10 people to a table, people who didn't know each other. And in fact, they came up with statements from table to table to table that were very similar. They want things related to health, economics. They want a better future. So if we can tap into those things that are very fundamental for all people, as we're talking with politicians and as we're talking with youth, the other piece I want to bring in is about hope. It's very important for us to make sure that we're thinking about how our messaging is hopeful, and that we're not talking too much about gloom and doom and things that are difficult for people. Sometimes they turn off. They don't want to talk about that. They want to hear about the hopeful path forward. There's a term now that's also used where people talk about climate grief, because youth are feeling so overwhelmed by some of these issues that some of them don't want to even take action. They would rather watch TikTok and think about something totally different. When we talk about how in classrooms, they can take a path to action. So the learning in classrooms, for example, is not just about being in the classroom. It's about how it connects to the community. So when some of the curriculum that I've written as an educator, thinking about how we train teachers also to think about the impacts of what's happening in the classroom and how that can tie to the community. I know, Andres, you asked earlier about education, so I also wanted to bring in that piece, that it's very important as we think about the learning and the teaching. And I know some of what we've talked about with Lake Biwa, also thinking about the importance of bringing those strategies into the community. So, and also that youth are not just giving ideas, but they are fully engaged with the implementation of those ideas and helping to steer the ship, because this is their future. And many of the youth that I know are concerned about what's going to happen next for them. And they need a hopeful path forward. I just attended 2 weeks ago a climate hope event at which people within the community came together to talk about some of the practices that are going on that were hopeful. And there were students from the high school, there were students from the university, there were members of the city council who were there talking together about the path forward in a hopeful way. And people left so energized. And I just want us to think also about the importance of hope as we communicate. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Stephanie. Sonia?
Thank you. I totally agree that we need to also show the positive side. And I think there are many good practice examples, some of which we have heard here today, or looking at the region where I'm now based in Lake Geneva, how much the water quality has improved and so on. And those need to be better shared. And also coming back to some of the earlier points mentioned, indeed, I think there's sometimes a disconnect between the lake and the river people, but it's important to link up more. I mean, we try to include in our different publication also lake case studies. For example, now we work on a publication on transboundary data exchange, which includes actually several case studies also from lakes. And as I said earlier on, I would really invite you to also take part or contribute to some of our planned events, some of which I could not mention here today. But for example, next year, in one year, we will have in Slovenia our meeting of the parties in October next year, and that will bring together policymakers, including ministers from around the world. And maybe one idea could be to have a side event specifically on lakes, if you would be interested. I cannot now promise it because we need to see all, but if you would be interested, we could at least consider and discuss this with our bureau. Yeah, thank you.
That's an excellent proposition. You know, as a reminder, why are we here? To elevate lake matters on the agenda, not only on the water agenda, but also on the environmental agenda. Okay?
Yeah, just a small follow-up. You said a 1-to-2 ratio. In the white paper, somebody did their homework, and in Chile, there's the estimate of an investment of $104 million over 15 years is predicted to provide a return of $1.8 billion. So it's far more than a 1.2 ratio. And the other point, as I got the mic, is the old saying, protection is better than cure. So investing in protection is a sure way of investing in economic returns into the future.
Patrick?
I just want to bring up an encounter I had with a politician. And his question was very innocent, but it struck me that we have a lot to do, and as other scientists. He asked me, we have been collecting a lot of water quality data, and we spend a lot of money collecting this data. And then he said, so what? What do you want us to do? Give you more money so that you can collect more data? And then what happens? So I had to step back and think, where have we not collected data, especially on lakes? Where have we not invested in collection of data? We have. And I went into some small research to look at lakes like, for example, Lake Victoria. And I was surprised that there are about 1,000 studies that have been done on Lake Victoria. And that was in 1 year. So I said to myself, so what is the problem? Is it us or the politicians? And the politician had left, but I kept thinking. And the thing that I came to understand in my own thinking is that what we have is many times sufficient to get us where we need to go. And that, to my understanding, is that if we employ some level of environmental analytics to what we have, we can give the politicians the benefit of what we have. Meaning, we have so much data collected in a year, but it means nothing so long as it's in shelves, in files in shelves, so long as it is in data banks. But if we begin to analyze and tell them, this is what it means, we tell them, 10 years from now, you may not have water in this lake at the level of obstruction. At the rate of pollution, 5 years from now, this lake will be a sewerage dam. And this kind of things, I think, alerts them. We're not giving them we're giving them both benefit to invest, and we're also giving them an alert. Also, it also means to them something to do with money. They're pouring money, and if they see that there is benefit, then they're able to invest back. So I think our messaging has to be both economics, social, where in terms of the benefit. We also have to use pictures, because we say a picture is 1,000 words. When we were trying to communicate with most politicians, we thought they don't have time. They need just a paragraph. But we thought a paragraph would not tell them much. So if I show them that this was the lake when it was 10 years ago, this is the lake now at this point, and this is the lake now at this point, immediately in those 3 pictures, he gets the message, or he or she gets the message. So we need at least tweak our communication into that kind of a thing. I saw Dr. Walter when he was talking about a spoon and a big thing. When we put it in pictures, that picture speaks even to class 1 students. It also speaks to university. You understand? You say, oh, this is the only match we have. So I think our messaging has to be in terms of that way of benefit, social benefit. It gives hope and also gives a warning to what they require. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Just for 1 second, Emily, because this is very important that what Patrick has said, and I would like to follow it up. You hit the nail on the head, because this is the issue. Politicians often asking that we are pouring in billions of dollars into this big data collection program. So what is the outcome of that? It's coming now. For instance, the GEMS water database that UNEP started to build up. It's a GEMS INREAD. I mean, it's a fantastic resource that is hidden in the data. But so far, we haven't had the algorithms and the models that would process it in a meaningful way. We haven't had the models that are spatially distributed and at the same time see the time dynamics of the processes with the predictive capability that if these things go like this, with the incoming pollution to that lake, it's going to be dead in about 10 years or 20 years. But now we have that. The modeling capabilities together with the data capturing capabilities were amazing. So indeed, we are approaching a situation where we are able to assess not only the amount of water in the lakes, locally, regionally, and globally, but also how that amount is changing with respect to and connected to water quality variables. So this opens up a totally new dimension. And that's why I think it would be wonderful if the UN agencies that are scattered all over the place would again unite in building up that assessment capability. The Global Lake Assessment Program, that could be a joint program, for instance, run or managed by UNEP with contributions from others. UNESCO would bring in the science, FAO would bring in land-based pollution, WHO would bring in the health data. So finally, a comprehensive assessment program could be built. We had launched 24 years ago the UN World Water Assessment Program. The whole idea was to come up with a regular assessment of the, most likely the quantitative aspects of water. And then all the agencies, we all contributed it, and that came out in the series of World Water Development Reports. Perhaps this could be one of the outcomes of this conference, to recommend that this is high time to launch a global lake assessment program, because we had GIS 30 years ago was up in the moon, literally. The distributed data processing was not even there. Artificial intelligence to handle the huge amount of data which we have. Every single day we had 1 hexabyte data coming from satellites, which is 10 on the power 18. 1 followed by 18 zeros. It's a big baby. Now, we have the means to handle that. 20 years ago or 30 years ago, we haven't had that. So if we unite forces, and that's where education is of key importance, to bring in the new science. And then we ourselves have to be a little bit more humble and learn how to communicate with the politicians. So if you agree, perhaps one of the recommendations that could go into the plenary session, and perhaps at the end to the statement, is a recommendation that we propose to launch an initiative called Global Lake Assessment with ramifications not only regionally, but also locally. Very important for the African lakes, or important for the Indian lakes. I was recently in Bengaluru, and they have huge problems with the lakes. And the political community doesn't know that. You want to talk, or there's a hand. Oh, I haven't seen it. Emily first, and then we go to the public. Please go ahead.
Sure. So I just wanted to add a few things to the discussion that we were just having about people's values associated with water and valuing their communities. In Michigan, one of the things that we've really focused on is recognizing how important that place attachment is for our residents in our state. And so even though we're surrounded by the Great Lakes, not every community is on the Great Lakes. So they connect most directly with the water resource that's in their community, whether that's a lake or a river or a stream. And so really focusing on their connection to their local water resource, but also empowering them to be reflective on what they value in their daily lives and their personal connection to water. And it might not necessarily be an environmental value. It might be an economic or a social, cultural, or spiritual value. So helping them sort of translate those values and those personal connections to that local water resource, and then empowering them to take action. Completely agree with your comments, Stephanie, about making sure that we give them hope. Most of our communities are very concerned about the next generation and keeping people and our youth in our state, and making sure that we have vibrant communities that are healthy and prosperous and provide opportunity and jobs. So that's a big focus of what we hear in a lot of our communities, not necessarily tied to water, but we know the benefits that water provides, both socially, economically, and ecologically in our communities, and how important that is. To the other point we were talking about earlier, about in terms of communicating with politicians, kind of still looking at those ways to connect those messages to what their residents and their local districts value in terms of water in their community, and translating that in the kind of actions that help advance stewardship for our lakes. One of the programs that we started in Michigan, and this actually came out of the Michigan Water Strategy that I talked about earlier, is called the Michigan Water School. And it's specifically designed to educate local and elected officials in our state about water literacy, or Great Lakes literacy, and teaching them just basic fundamental hydrologic information. So understanding they live in a watershed and how their local decisions affect downstream communities and their water resources, and how that provides and impacts downstream communities. So we've been offering this program for a number of years. It's a partnership with our academic institutions. And we recognize that in our state, most of our local and elected officials become state legislators, and then sometimes move into a federal position in our federal Congress. And so if we can build that foundation of knowledge and understanding of water principles at a very foundational level, that helps provide support not only for our policies that support sustainable lake management at the state level, but also at the federal level, and then supporting those financial investments that we want to see in terms of protecting and restoring our lake resources. So we think that's been a pretty effective approach, but it's something that we will have to continue forever because of political turnover. So those are just a couple of the comments that I wanted to mention. I'm happy to talk more, and I'll mention it a little bit further in my presentation tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Emily. The interesting thing, if I may make a footnote here, is that those guys in the Great Lakes, together with the Baikal, they are sitting on 40% of the freshwater resources of the world. So one would say that, oh, those Michigan people are, must be happy and don't care about the thing, but they just show the opposite, because there's a long-term thinking of what could happen to that resource. Alejandro, was that you, or? Yeah, please go ahead. Rafi, go ahead.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. The discussion, the panel discussion has been absolutely fascinating. I mean, the different perspectives from Lenny, from Ajit, from Patrick. It appears to me, clearly there is a huge disconnect between the environment and the water community, and how do we bridge that gap? I think that to me seems to be one very fundamental challenge here. And the suggestion that also one of the recommendations that Andras just put out, in terms of utilizing the tools to start looking at the existing data, et cetera, et cetera. I think that's absolutely a vital recommendation. But I think we also need to move beyond science too. I think it is important. We need to continue utilizing science appropriately, fully, but actions are needed. I think so. To me, one key recommendation is, we are talking about the science policy discourse. How do we move into management? Yeah? Because that is where the benefit lies. And also the point that Ajit mentioned about dams in India, for example. sedimentation. So we are losing storage. Okay, and Anders mentioned, by 2050 the population will be 12 billion. So the needs for that water storage is so critical. And I think, to me, adapting to climate change is a very key opportunity here to bring the water and environment community together. Yeah? Whether it is built storage or natural storage. At the end of the day, our concerns are, yes, we want to make sure that we safeguard the vital biodiversity, environmental values, but they only matter if they are important to people. Yeah? So I think, to me, that's where one of the critical linkages ought to be. And, in my presentation, I've made a few very specific recommendations. I hope you would consider them as we move forward, because there's some solid work that has been done, and I think it can be built upon that. Okay, well, all the messages that I heard, the various presentations and the videos that ILEC has prepared are excellent, because they are showing problems, challenges, how do you deal with them institutionally at the policy level, utilizing science, etc., etc. So anyway, just a few comments to continue with the discussion. I think this is a critical topic, and it needs to be elevated very significantly as we move forward. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rafi. We will incorporate your points to the recommendations of not only the colloquium this afternoon, but perhaps we move on with those recommendations to the plenary session at the end, because it would be important if there would be a support expressed by the participants that A, we need a World Lake Day, B, we need a global water assessment program, and C, we need to close the gap between environment and water issues, because we are talking about the same thing. Yes, sir, Alejandro. Marie Claire.
Yep. So
ladies first, please. I'm sorry, she was first.
Thank you so much. I just want to talk about when it comes to lake sustainable management. I think there is something that we should really consider, like bringing community on board, because a local community are the one that they have a direct access to the water, like they use it directly. I'll give an example. This year I traveled to Lake Albert, it's in Uganda. I was really sad when I saw the local community. It's a fishing community, really a poor fishing community where they have no sanitation. And you would see the way children were enjoying swimming in the water. But when you see all those children, they have yellow eyes, big bellies. It's a hotspot for bilharzia. So I really think that there is a need of like awareness through local communities. Then we need to bring them on board by also through like teaching them a way of conserving the nature, a way of conserving the lake, by also teaching them, like if they don't know bilharzia, that's why they do everything in water. So I approached one lady, I asked, why don't you have like sanitation here? So it's like we are poor, but we don't have sanitation. But also we believe in our lake. We know that spiritually, our God lives in water. So God clean water during night. So they drink water directly without even boiling it. So they are not aware, like they are just using water, enjoying water. They are somehow connected to water, but they don't know how to protect or conserve the water. So I believe in community engagement and bringing them on board, but also through citizen science by teaching them, like they could help in collecting data and they could help in water protection. Yeah.
Absolutely, and that should start in the elementary school. Because if you teach the kids what bilharzia says and how deadly it could cause blindness, that generation will learn it. It will take some time. Please go ahead.
Yep. Thank you so much. Okay. Yeah. So So I'm working for the World Bank. So just from my project, I want to share one example of like how we fill the gap between the politicians and the science. So one country where I work is in Central Asia. So that's where the politicians, I agree that they always want to have a result, short result. But then, so in their case, they really wanted to solve the mud flow, like floods. So basically, they want to, of course, borrow the money from the World Bank, but then they want to do more great solutions like embankments and not dams, but embankments. But then how we did it is more like bringing science and also experience and knowledge from other countries, so that yes, embankment is important for the short-term resolution. However, let's look at the upstream as well. So the tree planting and then also the green and then nature-based solutions. So the combination is really needed. So that's when we bring science communities, and also we launch a study to do a risk assessment and mapping and those. So that's one example where we bring science into this. And also I agree with your recommendation about those global lake management assessment and those. So that's where we also need national governments, their ownership, because otherwise there will be another fancy assessment and nobody use. But then if you can have national governments, their ownership, and then yes, for example, like as the World Bank come in, and then they can pick some of the actions where each individual project can support. So that's where maybe you can link the science into with the politics. That's one. And then since Nepal folks are here, so I also wanna support their argument, like the disaster risk management. So for example, they have a unique problem like a glacial lake outburst flood, which is maybe very unique for Nepal or Northern India or the Central Asia. But I once went to Nepal and saw their damage, like because of this climate change, glaciers keep melting and then glacial lakes expanding, and then suddenly it collapse. So those are not the uniform theme, but then like so specific countries, they have such challenges, and then those glacial lakes are like elevation like 4,000. You cannot go hiking to reach there to do something. That's why science can come in, maybe satellite data use, drone data use, and then like modeling and those. So also let's not forget their challenges as well. So those 3 points I wanted to highlight.
Well, yeah. Thank you so much. I think perhaps the vector of these messages emanating from this meeting could automatically be ILEC, and through ILEC, I hope that we will be in the position to somehow raise the interest of the Japanese government. Perhaps they would be interested in partnership. On behalf of the Future Earth Program, the Sustainable Water Futures, we have an office in Brisbane. I definitely commit the program in a possibly as strong as possible cooperation. So we have to have obviously governments, but we have to have the movers and shakers in terms of the scientific community and the technical people. Sandra, you have. Alejandro. I'm sorry.
I think that something that is arising from all the participation is the question that we need to work with politicians, but the problem also that politicians have a short perception, short term, because basically they don't know if they will be there 3 or 4 years later. And also the administrative changes have a strong effect when there is a process about lake management, basin management, and when the politicians go away, the new guys probably they won't understand the process, and usually they bring together their own technical team. So I think that we need to remember that we need to work with politicians, but we need to strengthen basically the governance processes. And the governance process is not only about government, it's about the rest of the stakeholders getting involved in the process. The governance process integrating these several group of stakeholders provide a solid, digamos, base to move forward. And so if we take this into account, if we strengthen the governance processes, and we make sure to include the science aspects in there, scientists, researchers providing counseling, I think that we have a better opportunity to work. So this means that we need to prepare our information to translate it not only for politicians, but basically for the rest of the stakeholders when they need to understand it. And basically into that, I think that it's important for the international institutions to have to imply, to broaden that aspects of governance in all the projects that could be supported by them, not only for financial institutions, but also for institutions as the UN based it with.
Exactly. So basically, probably to have a stable system, you have to have 3 legs. One leg is the NGOs, like ILEC. Another leg is the scientific community. And the third leg is there's no more effective leg in multilateral diplomacy than the United Nations. So we need to work through and with the UN agencies, whether it be UNEP or FAO or UNESCO, and have them on board. Because they can provide, with a couple of resolutions, they can raise millions of dollars to help the implementation of the program. I will be going to Paris on Monday, attending the UNESCO General Conference. And in my intervention, I would like to report on the outcome of this meeting that there was a strong support by the community here to move ahead with the International Lake Day or the World Lake Day, as well as to come up with a model that would process the data for the use of decision makers to inform the political community. And then if the General Conference just noted that, which means there's a UN resolution, what is the meeting of noting? Noting doesn't mean yes, it doesn't mean no, it's noting. But that's a starting point to start the ball rolling. Please go ahead.
How do we talk to politicians, to the community? And I think important that we stress the importance of a communication strategy in all the things that we're doing. For example, in the Global Lake Assessment Program, side by side with that is a communication strategy to different audiences.
Part of it.
Yeah.
I would like to continue in this idea, and I would like to emphasize one key point that Stephanie pointed out: hope. If we continue to do science, is because we have some hope about the future, okay? And politicians or stakeholders or any one of us are completely tired, boring about problems. We need to present solutions. If we believe in the science that we are doing for a long time, okay, I think for the most common problems that we have, we can start to present some solutions. We cannot go again to talk with politicians or governance or something like that to point out problems. We can say, okay, in 10 years, we can lose this water body, the ecosystem serves, but we know how you can help to solve this problem. We can present some solutions. As Patrick said, we have a lot of data nowadays for the mainstream. You said you have satellites, we have a lot of database. So we need to be training to present solutions for the problems. We need to show that there is some hope to save our bodies, our environmental, because nobody can continue to talk about only problems. We need politicians want votes. And to get votes, they need to show that they are able to support some solution. not to point out new problems, okay?
I hope that the black benches don't be like moving of the discussion. It was very much interesting. But actually, we are not everybody living because we will have a couple of days. We will have a couple of days ahead of us to continue the discussion. This was just the appetizer for the upcoming discussions, and I would like to thank everybody who contributed to this debate. Finished. Thank you.
Thank you, Anders, and thank you very much for all of you for great contribution. I'm sorry, I still see some hands. I also see some people who should have been part of this lively discussion sort of reserve themselves. But we have 3 more days of presentations and interactions and so on. So we look forward to continue with this. But at the moment, Walter and Anders, myself sit together and prepare a note to report to tomorrow's plenary of the main World Lake Conference, what the outcome of this international colloquium is about. So, if you do not have any violent opposition, I would like to close this. Thank you very much. Yes, we have a lot, final comments of all this, but this part is the close, the panel discussion. The overall closing remarks would be our colleague from
Okay, thank you, Nakamura Sensei. My name is Takahashi I'm the executive director of IGES, and also I'm a board member of ILEC. So it's my great pleasure and honor to make some comments to conclude today's workshop. Actually, I have to confess, I am not the expert of the lake management, but also at the same time, I have to confess, I started my career doing work relating lake management because I joined the Ministry of Environment in 1983, and my first job is implementing newly established water quality standards for phosphorus and nitrogen for lakes to control the eutrophication. And also I was involved in the preparing a new special law for lake conservation. And but after that, unfortunately, I have not so much chance to engage with the lake issue. But after the retirement from the ministry, I'm very happy to join the ILEC as a board member. And finally, this is my first time to join the World Lake Conference. So it takes very long years, but I am very happy to come here. So because of the time, I don't summarize, but of course, as all of us recognized, we have a very fruitful and forward-looking presentations from national governments, local governments, academia, and international organization for the sustainable lake management and their experience and the challenges. And also we have a very intensive session by our UNEP colleagues on the various activities. I really thanks to Patrick for his very excellent arrangements. And also we have a very fruitful and active panel discussions chaired by Professor Andras, and many thought-provoking interventions. So I don't summarize, but I like to say that I strongly recognize through all the discussions that the lake management is importance of lake management to address all the SDGs goals. And also I recognize the importance and the great opportunity for our further collaboration among us and among various broad range of stakeholders, domestically and internationally. for the enhancement of the sustainable lake management based on the various international agreements, in particular the recent UNEA resolution. I also think we can share the idea of establishing World Lake Day to highlight the importance of lakes and promote activities for sustainable management of the lake. So anyway, conclude, I thank again, sincerely thank again all the speakers and participants for their excellent contribution and collaboration. And I also look forward to fruitful discussion and fruitful outcome of the 19th World Lake Conference starting tomorrow. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Takahashi. And then thank you. This concludes the ILEC-UNEP International Colloquium. Thank you all very much for taking time out of your busy schedule to participate in this colloquium today. Thank you very much.